And now, stand-up community subscribers and listeners from around the globe, it's time to Stand Up with Pete Dominic, where we ask the important questions that impact you, your family, and your community. Such as, could the contagious Delta variant infiltrate Chuck Norris's vaccine? And could my mentally impaired elderly relatives bickering upgrade to a full-on MMA grudge match? And now, the podcast host who will remove his code-violating construction for anybody except Steve Bannon, Pete Dominic.
Yeah, thank you. He's back. Pete Code drove from Oregon and the in-laws to California, and it is great to have you, sir. Thank you very much for being such a solid announcer. I am Pete Dominic. This is Stand Up, and John Carroll with You Gotta Stand Up playing under us. Go buy it right now. It is, what is it? July 8th. It's Thursday. It's summer. It's hot. A lot of shit's happening. I want to talk about it with you, as I do every day here on the podcast. I want to apologize for the technical issue yesterday. I beat the shit out of my my fake producer, Keith. Kid is he's all bruised up. He's wearing a sling. He's not happy. Are you, Keith? I'm literally in the shed looking and I'm so committed to this bit. I'm looking over at an imaginary producer. I'm looking down at him and pretending he has a sling on. Yeah, so sorry about that. Technical issue always sucks. You can tell me the moment you hear that there's dead air or sound issue or the podcast isn't loading, which was the case yesterday, which was a goddamn nightmare. But I am back. It's loaded. Yesterday was great. Barry Ritholtz, everybody always loves. Read Dr. Mia Bloom for the first time. Today, I've got Steve Levine on electric cars. And I also have Cameron Joseph of ViceNews, who's a really good congressional reporter. And I had like a 45-minute conversation with him. So, two very different issues. Hopefully you like one of them. Also, I've got a news segment and I've got a special conversation coming your way right now because I'm pretty obsessed with these stories. Like, I watch all those videos when if people get in fights, I will watch those videos and I will be entertained by them. And I don't feel good about it. I'm not proud of it. It's like watching porn. Like I'm sorry. I wish I didn't watch porn or watch videos of people fighting, but I do. And I'm being honest with you. And I mean, you do it too. So stop judging me. But I watch all the crazy Karen. There's even a YouTube video Karen's in the wild or something. It's kind of funny, but it's all ugly. It's all ugly human behavior. And you want to hope and pray that you would never, ever do that to another person. But I once dressed down somebody at a gate, a flight, like the gate at the airport, the woman working at the gate. They canceled the flight and I made it I yelled at her. It was when I was working at CNN in 2010 and I was flying back and forth from either DC or Atlanta to New York. And so it was the same flight every week. So I saw her the next week and I brought her flowers and apologized to her. And it meant so much to her because I was so abusive and such an asshole that she probably had to sit with that for, I don't know how long. And then I guess it's you're inspired when someone admits that, Mom, I was a shithead. I'm sorry. I was an abusive prick in that moment. I fully take responsibility. So I got the woman flowers and she was really appreciative and kind and forgiving, thankfully. And so I watch all those videos and you do too. Maybe you don't. Maybe you're a better person. Maybe you're getting outside and getting away from your screen. Good for you. But all the people being super racist, I watch those too. And so you may have seen this one from this guy in New Jersey who's attacking this white guy in New Jersey, ugly, fat, shitty white guy in New Jersey attacking this young black man in front of his apartment or condo or whatever. And he's calling him the N-word out loud on video several times. Calls him a monkey. Says go back to Africa. Like all the most unoriginal hate shit. Like he did the trifecta. Awful, dude. And he kept yelling out his address. And then the cop showed up. And he's like telling the cop that he's out of his jurisdiction. It was just the ugliest of human hate. And I watched it. And I was entertained by the horror of it all. But here's the thing. This has happened now a couple times. If you do that, if you exhibit that horrible hatred and everybody's got a camera in their pocket now, then you do run the risk of like 100 people showing up at your house and jeering you and heckling you. 100 black people. Like if you're a white guy and you're openly racist in front of your own home, which is a very common thing because racist white people hate when there's people they don't recognize, much less minorities in their neighborhood, and you tape it. It's on tape. Like you're screwed, maybe. And so I just thought that was an amazing thing that's happened a few times, at least that I've seen. And so I don't know. I just want to get somebody's take on it, a black person's take on it. And I haven't talked to one of my best friends in the world for 20 years, Curtis, in a while. I call him Breeze. Cool Breeze. We went to college together and we were roommates. And so I called him up and asked him about this whole thing. And we ended up having just a great talk as we always do. But this time I recorded it and he said I could play it. And so here's my conversation with Curtis from last night about this and other stuff as well. He calls me a lot of things, including roomie. Because like I said, we were roommates in college.
What's going on, roomie?
You're telling me that you're opening a package right now, it sounds like.
I'm putting my shit away. I'm putting my food
What are you doing? Will you stop making noise?
Okay, I'll stop making noise.
God damn, what are you eating?
I'm eating green peas and grilled chicken and brown rice.
The hell happened to you?
Man, I'm trying to live. I eat for my blood type.
What?
Eat for your blood type. Study it.
No. You try to sell me Bitcoin next.
Hey, that's the wave of the future. Keep going. There's some millionaires out there. Cryptocurrency.
Listen, I called you to ask you what you thought of when someone says something super racist and it's caught on tape and they give out their address and 100 black people show up. That I said, that's the America I want to live in. What do you think of that reaction?
I think it's perfect.
What would you do it?
I mean, absolutely. Absolutely. I wouldn't have a problem with it.
Are you not on the text chain where they're like, everybody go to this dude's house? He just is.
I'm not that big in text chains and social media, but really, I would do it in a heartbeat.
You said it's a younger person's thing to do.
Yeah, if you look at the civil rights movement back in the day, it was younger people. John Lewis was young. Martin Luther King was young. All of them were young. Like I said, it's my generation, and this generation now has picked. You
cut out. You got muffled. You said it skipped your activism. You think activism, the movement, the civil rights movement, was your parents, our parents' generation, and our kids' generation, not so much our generation?
Yeah. It skipped my.
Why do you think that's because we're talking about late 80s, early 90s for us. I'm 45. What are you, 47?
Well, the reason being is that crack and drugs really hit the streets in the 80s. So it was a different vibe back then. You know what I'm saying?
What was the vibe like? Like, did you grow up with like crack in New York City? That whole.
Of course. And you know that.
I mean, I'm making assumptions, but what was that like for you? Was everybody? Did a lot of people you know? Did a lot of people you know smoke crack?
No.
Not
at all. No.
So, was it not an epidemic where you lived?
It was an epidemic, but at the same time, crack hit the street. I was 12, 13. No crackheads at 12 and 13.
Well, you didn't notice them. You didn't see them.
But you see them in the streets if they were older. Yeah. But the point is, if people had it in their families, obviously families kept that as quiet as possible. You know what I'm saying? Until they couldn't keep it private no more.
Did you know?
I knew drug dealers.
You knew who the drug dealers were.
Exactly.
Well, what do you think? Like, what was the crack epidemic was happening, but like that was the issue you think of your time that was kind of like the most damaging, most.
That was the issue. That was the issue.
What about crime in general?
Civil rights. I mean, crime was crime. I mean, you had the issue like, say, Rodney King getting beat up by cops. And you had, Yusef Hawkins getting killed by a few white dudes in New York, in Brooklyn. And you had these different type of things going on. But the difference between then and now is social media. Social media didn't exist. So all this shit that's going on, now the shit was probably going on then. We just didn't hear about it.
Didn't see it. Cameras and social media. Yeah.
Yeah, the news dictated what we heard. Now, guess what? We are the news. If you got a camera phone, you're your own news person. There you go. That
really is. You know what? It really is that simple. It's like you didn't know. You didn't know what was happening. It's like you could go back before phones. Like you didn't know that 50,000 people died at Gettysburg during the Civil War. If you lived in Idaho, like that news didn't get to you for weeks.
I mean, look at Juneteenth.
Right.
The slaves were set free.
They didn't know it. Right. They didn't know the Civil War.
Years to find out.
That's a great example.
That's my point. There you go. Prime example. Social media now has information readily available. I mean, phones make everything readily available because you can post it on any site.
So if crime was an issue, how did you see it growing up as a little boy, as a teenager? How did you stay away from it? Never be. I don't want to make assumptions like that you weren't.
You stay away from it because you wasn't trying to go to jail.
Well, I didn't mean. How did you not be a criminal? I meant how do you not be a victim of crime? Like, were you like? What was it like? What was it like?
Parents, your parents. Basically, you had to have parents who kind of sheltered you. You kind of had to have parents who were, making sure that you wasn't out there to the streets. You had to have parents say, okay, hey, you have to be in by a certain time. You had to have parents who cared. That's where it starts at. You know what I'm saying? If you home, then guess what? You ain't going to be a victim of crime.
Well,
most crime ain't happening in broad daylight. It's happening late at night.
Were you ever a victim of crime?
No.
Never? Not once?
I mean, outside of a car being broken into my house, broken in front of my house. But outside of that, like, was I ever robbed or anything?
Never.
No.
I was.
Well, that's just you. I mean, I would rob you if I could. I mean, it's not like you're really threatening or
but that insinuates. Insinuates I have.
You look like you have.
What do I have that you want? What do I have that you want?
I mean, you look like you have.
You're forced to compliment me. It's awesome. What do I have that you want to rob?
What do I have that you want to rob now? That I want to rob now? Absolutely nothing.
No. You're stuck in this. You're stuck in this bit. You said you wanted to rob me. Now you have to tell me what it is you want to take.
I would have robbed you if I saw you. Granted, I've known you since 1994. Now, if I saw you walking the streets of the Bronx, New York, I'm robbing you.
What are you gonna get?
Whatever you got. Clearly, you got something more than I.
You know what I have.
So
you live with me.
Exactly.
You gonna take my lacrosse stick?
Hey! All I know is this: is that you had a nice apartment in Manhattan that cost way more than what I had in the Bronx, New York.
Please! I've been to your house. You have a much nicer house now than I do now. Now, let's just talk about now. You have a much nicer home than I do. So
I'm smart enough to live in Atlanta, Georgia, where property value is cheaper. There you go.
What else can I ask you? You want to go? What do you think?
I mean, I do wake up at 2:15 in the morning to go work out.
What?
I work out at 4:00 in the morning. I get up at 2:15. I shower, get ready to roll.
All right. Well, then you should probably go eat your peas and rice and chicken.
Yes. And next time you want to interview me between the hours of 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. Those are my hours of comedic
All right. Before we go, what do you want to say about us?
Oh, man, I love you, man. I mean, you're great. You know, I mean, you've been one of my best friends since, 93?
93, yeah.
And you've been loyal. I love your parents. I love your brother, Brian. I love your wife and kids. I love everything about you. I mean, you're awesome. You're amazing. I love the fact how you have found a way from a different way, and now you're making moves. I love it. Your podcast is great. Keep doing what you do.
Oh, I thought you were gonna make fun of me, and I'm gonna cry.
Nah, well, what would make fun of? That you're not a jerk. You're a survivor. You're a beast. You're winning in the pandemic. You can't make fun of that.
All right. Well, thank you. I'm going to play this on the podcast tomorrow. Do I have your permission? Yeah,
of course you got my permission.
Can I use your full name? Are you going to? Is there anything you said that would you get canceled?
My name is Curtis. My name is Curtis Smith, aka Cool Breeze, aka the Captain Kurt, aka Smash.
Why do black people have so many nicknames?
Because it's based on the era where people met you. I'm Smash to my kid from when I was a kid. I'm Cool Breeze from college, and I came out here. I'm the captain of Atlanta. Captain.
Do you remember how I applied for a nickname?
No, I don't remember. I think your nickname was just Pete the Meat because that was your comedy name.
Yeah.
I didn't realize you had a nickname besides Meat.
The Meat. No, that was Elliot gave me that.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, that's it.
See, a nickname is given
to you. Yeah, but you can't exactly. That's what I learned. I was like, I want a nickname, and all the black folks were like, you don't choose it, like it's chosen for you, and you know, and it's about you.
It's chosen for
and then,
you.
So that's how it was explained to me by Taekwon, right? And then he said said it has to be something, you know, true to you, and since you never have sex with anyone, your nickname should be Dusty Dick. Well,
that did serve you. Yeah, I would say would serve you now, but you have a wife and 2 kids. So, you know, clearly you're no longer Dusty. You know, maybe a windstorm, but you're not Dusty.
All right. I love you. Thank you.
Love you too,
Bye.
baby. Bye.
All right, there you go. Curtis Cool Breeze Smith, SUNY Cobleskill, State University of New York at Cobleskill. We graduated. Well, he was actually older than me. He graduated a year before me, before me. 94. I'm 95. Anyway, that's just the tip of the iceberg. I got to get my other 2 friends who I still talk to. The 4 of us. I'm thinking about getting the 4 of us on like a Zoom and recording it. Just about culture, and that's how we talk. You just heard it. There's a kind of vulnerability and honesty and a lack of concern about, like, there's zero concern for me that I could say something wrong regarding race or anything else. That's how I feel. There's a level of comfort that I've had for like 20 years with these guys, and it's special, and I love them. So should get them all together. All right, so now it's time, however, to get to the news, ladies and gentlemen, everything that happened yesterday, and it's called The Last 24. Let's do it. All right, a couple stories I want to mention to you, just read a little bit, and then we'll get to some audio and a news dump. All right, let me start by reading you stories. Speaking of racism, today and racism. Off-duty cop being racist to black man at wedding and wound up getting knocked unconscious. Let me just read you this story from rawstory.com. An off-duty police officer attending a wedding reception wound up getting knocked unconscious after he continuously made racist comments to a black attendee. Local news station WATE reports that 22-year-old off-duty Knoxville police officer Tanner Holt last month was attending a local wedding reception when he began taunting a black guest by telling him that he didn't, quote, know they let black people into the reception hall. Holt then claimed that he was part of the black community despite being obviously white, at which point the black man simply asked him to stop talking about racial issues. Can we stop talking? Listen, you're drunk and you're saying stuff. Maybe you should tone it down. Let's just change the subject. Let's not talk about racial things. All right, I'm making stuff up now. Back to the story. After making repeated pleas with Holt to stop being racist, the black man apparently lost patience and slugged Holt, knocking him unconscious. 4 witnesses corroborated accounts of the incident. All witnesses stated that Holt was very intoxicated when the incident occurred. He was transported to UT Medical Center for treatment. No charges have been filed in the incident. Knoxville Police Department is investigating the altercation and has given no indication when or if Holt might return to duty. Not a major story. It's just a single incident that occurred, but I was entertained by it, so I wanted to lead with it. All right, moving on to something a bit more important. Here's another crazy news story I got to just mention to you, and it's woke up to this one yesterday, that President Trump, when he was still president, allegedly praised Adolf Hitler during a discussion with White House Chief of Staff John Kelly in 2018 while on a trip to Paris to commemorate the armistice after World War I, according to excerpts of an upcoming book by Wall Street Journal reporter Michael Bender. Donald Trump, while he was president, reportedly told John Kelly, his chief of staff, well, listen, Hitler did a lot of good things. He said Hitler did a lot of good things to John Kelly, who was explaining to the president history and who the allies and the adversaries to America were in both wars. The book is called Frankly, We Did Win This Election, the inside story of how Trump lost. Anyway, Trump was apparently undeterred and persisted in his defense of the German dictator by claiming the country made economic gains under Hitler's leadership. Trump denied the comments and that the conversation happened when asked about it by the writer, Michael Bender. And I'll tell you what, I did not see that one coming. I'm just kidding. Everybody saw that one coming. I mean, there was reports that he used to keep one of Hitler, like a Hitler book, a book about Hitler on his nightstand, right? Let me just look that up. Yeah, I just searched Trump Hitler nightstand. Donald Trump's ex-wife once said Trump kept a book of Hitler's speeches by his bed. Yeah. So I did not see that one coming. No, we all saw it coming. Come on. He's the Nazi. You got to wonder how Jared Kushner feels about that. You do. You got to wonder what he thinks. Don't you really have to wonder a little bit? All right, let me move on to something much more important than those two stories. It's COVID. The global death toll has now surpassed 4 million human souls. The Delta variant dominant strain in the U.S., and it's a race between the vaccine and the highly contagious variants. The death toll, according to USA Today, 3 times the number of people killed in traffic accidents around the globe every year. It's about equal to the population of Los Angeles or the nation of Georgia. It's equivalent to more than half of Hong Kong or close to 50% of New York City. And even then, it's widely believed to be an undercount because of overlooked cases or deliberate concealment. The new numbers come as variants surge across the world, especially the Delta variant, considered more infectious than the original strain. And here is CBS News Major Harris, who was at the anchor desk last night on CBS News, Evening News, with the Surgeon General. That's Vivek Murthy. It looks exactly like Ezra Klein. It's just absolutely uncanny. Anyway, here he is now. Let's get serious and talk about it.
Vaccinated people should anticipate, direct quote, that they will get COVID this summer from the Delta variant. Do you agree?
I think the risk is higher and higher every day that if you are unvaccinated, that you may become sick with COVID-19 because this Delta variant is spreading rapidly. So I am deeply worried about people who are not vaccinated because they are a greater risk because we have a variant that is far more transmissible than any version of COVID that we have seen to date.
The government's vaccine persuasion campaign, such as it is, seems to have hit a wall. Will the government at the federal level start encouraging schools and businesses to mandate vaccines?
This is not just something government's going to solve or the private sector. We've all got to work together. But going forward, we're getting to the hard part of this vaccination campaign. And it's going to take, individuals having conversations with their family and friends. It's going to take doctors and nurses talking to their patients and communities. And it's going to take employers and schools doing everything that they can to help encourage and support people in getting vaccinated.
What is going to be necessary to change the minds that haven't yet been changed on the vaccination question?
Well, I think something that more broadly as a country that we have struggled with over the last year and change is that this pandemic has unfortunately been very politicized in some ways. I think people have also been subject to a great deal of misinformation.
How concerned should parents be about their children under 12 living in or going to areas where vaccination rates are low.
If kids take the appropriate safety measures in schools, we've seen actually very limited transmission within school environments. That's really good news. That means our kids can continue to learn in a school environment and still be quite safe. But when it comes to outside of school activities, I would be cautious when taking my kids to areas that have a higher degree of circulating virus where vaccination rates are low. Because again, the Delta variant is moving very, very quickly.
All right, there you go. Vivek Murthy. He's a Surgeon General on CBS News with Major, did I say Major Harris earlier? I mean Major Garrett. Major Harris played running back for West Virginia Mountaineers when I was watching college football growing up. And I guess he's the only other major I know. My bad. All right, let's now move on to another expert, is Dr. Anthony Fauci. He was on MSNBC with Chris Hayes last night. Here is a bit of what he had to say.
This is, as you mentioned very correctly, life-saving. It's not like we're out there trying to sell encyclopedias. We're out there trying to get people to save their lives, those of their loved ones, and those of the community. So whatever it takes. I mean, one of the things that we've done, and I think has helped somewhat and maybe a lot, is to employ trusted messengers, as opposed to what you heard from that clip of somebody doesn't want the government knocking on their doors. Well, we're not talking about the government knocking on your door. We're talking about people who you can relate to in the community, who you trust, and whoever that might be. I mean, I've been speaking, for example, to a number of people on their Instagrams, or, people at barbershops or beauty salons or physicians, family doctors, people you trust, sports figures, people in the community that really get it, that what we're talking about is trying to save lives. And the piece that you just gave is absolutely accurate, that where there are high levels of vaccination, there's low levels of infection, low hospitalization, and almost no deaths. Where you have no vaccination, you have higher levels of infection, higher risk, and hospitalization. It's not complicated, Chris, and you've said that, very passionately, and I agree with you completely. This is not complicated. We're not asking anybody to make any political statement one way or another. We're saying try and save your life and that of your family and that of the community. It's, we have so many things, as you said, so many diseases that I deal with that don't have solutions. It's very frustrating. You don't have a treatment or you don't have a vaccine. Here we have a vaccine that's highly, highly effective in preventing disease and certainly in preventing severe disease and hospitalization. It's easy to get, it's free, and it's readily available. So, you've got to ask, what is the problem? Get over it. Get over this political statement. Just get over it and try and save the lives of yourself and your family.
Yeah, well, I don't think that's effective, Dr. Fauci. Just get over it. I'm not sure that's the scientific communication that is going to be most effective convincing people who still aren't vaccinated. Not sure. He seems to be a little frustrated, a little fed up, like we all are. But we got to do better than that, I think. I saw on Twitter a former actor, maybe he's still acting. I don't know. He used to play Hercules. This guy, Kevin Sorbo, he's like this right-wing Christian nut job now. I interviewed him years ago. I argued with him and his wife on Sirius XM. Anyway, I saw that he had tweeted that the following. He said, "I'm not getting the COVID vax. Who's with me?" I quoted that tweet as dead people. That's who's with you, Kev. Dead people. All right, moving on. Here is a hilarious, 1 minute clip from one of my favorite shows, The Majority Report, with Sam Cedar, who is arguing with this libertarian guy about, building regulations and the collapse of the tower, the residential tower down in Surfside in Miami. And this guy's like an Ayn Rand think tanker. And he said the Florida condo collapse happened because people made a bad decision and they suffer the consequences as a result. I don't know. I love Sam, and I love when he argues with libertarians. I thought this is pretty great, and so here it is.
Oh, but you know what? I also like the incentive of, in a free market, not in the world in which we live now, where everybody hides behind the government, of the insurance company that insured that building. because they've got a lot of claims that they're going to have to pay now, and they're going to take a big hit. They, in a free market, they would have sent an inspector. Now, in the world we live in today, they don't, because they rely on the government inspector, which probably was not a good idea.
No,
because
the government inspector made it quite clear that there were problems there. The private inspector, I'm sorry,
20 years ago when the building was built with a basis.
I'm sorry. The private inspectors also, the engineering company that was in there, the private owners of that building made the decision not to fix it. Now, were there stricter government regulations?
Then why are we worried about it? Then they made a decision and they suffered the consequences.
Because there's 100
people who made a decision, who made a bad decision, and suffer the consequences of it. I'm not justifying the building collapsing. I'm saying that people make decisions. If I make a decision to walk into the street without looking, should the driver be limited in his capacity to drive because I made a stupid decision? The point is that there are, what you want is for the people who make the decision to suffer, to benefit from the consequence of their actions.
Okay. All right. You got to see Sam's face throughout that. The guy's name is Yaron Brook on the Majority Report, Sam Cedar. All right. And we also heard from the QAnon congresswoman, and I think it's fair to say she's an anti-Semite, Marjorie Taylor Greene. She was on Anti-Semite, Steve Bannon's show. And I only play this because basically she's saying that Trump won't be reinstated. Now, the Mine Pillow guy is saying he will be, and he's even saying like a specific date in August. And, Marjorie Taylor Greene is trying to lower the expectations on Steve Bannon's stupid show. Stupid, but very wildly popular show. Here it is. Marjorie Taylor Greene on the fun-time, anti-Semitic Steve Bannon War Room show.
You've been at the forefront in this fight in Georgia. Your comments, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania starting the full forensic audit that is taking place in Arizona, that eventually, and you've been tweeting this out, we're going to get a full one in Georgia. It's happening in Pennsylvania. I know you can't, and we're not asking you to give any inside baseball here, but just overall, how do you think it's playing out now, this patriot movement that's demanding, don't give me any new laws, I don't need new laws, I need to get to the bottom of 3 November of 2020. Your comments and observations, ma'am.
Well, and I think that's important, Steve, and I really appreciate that. I've been very careful about which things I think are correct about the election, and I'm really excited to say this Fulton County audit that's going on here in Georgia they are right on track, and I'm so excited for them and so proud of them. I've been talking to the lead attorney and talking with our other attorneys and hearing all about the real evidence they have. And this is something I can fully get behind. There was real election fraud that happened in Fulton County. Georgia did not go for Joe Biden. I have been saying it. I've lived in this state my entire life. We reelected President Trump on November 3rd in 2020. So I'm excited to see them continue to do their hard work, and they're playing it smart. You don't see them on the news running around sharing every detail that they come up with. They're going to get the job done, and then they're going to roll it out correctly. But I also want to say this, Steve. I want people to be careful in what they believe. It's going to be very difficult to overturn the 2020 election. And so I hate for anyone to get their hopes up thinking that President Trump is going to be back in the White House in August, because that's not true. And I'm telling you, as a member of Congress, that's a very difficult thing to make happen.
Well, I respect you if you're still listening. If you made it through that clip with me, then congratulations. It only gets better from here on out. Oh, rough stuff. Yeah. So apparently there's some kind of a situation going on with Georgia as well, an audit, and there's, of course, no evidence of any fraudulent voting that would affect the outcome of the election in any of these states. But a federal judge has blocked efforts to invalidate parts of new Georgia voting law ahead of the July runoffs. And there's just a tremendous amount of news coming out of Georgia, but we'll see what happens there. And now I want to play for you the President of the United States. This is Joe Biden talking yesterday about his what he wants to see done about tax policy. So here's that.
I'm going to be making the case to the American people until the job is done, until we bring this bipartisan deal home, until we meet the needs of families today and the economy of tomorrow, and we can pay for it. Let me give you a rough example. This isn't, by the way, the American plan for infrastructure is paid for. It's paid for. And this plan that I'm talking about, which is really expensive if you add it all up, well, guess what? The fact is that it's paid for as well. And let me tell you how we're going to pay for it. Some of the ways to pay for the rest of it is the last couple of years, for example, 55 of the Fortune 500 companies making billions of dollars did not pay a single penny in taxes, not one single cent. Well, I don't want to punish anybody, but everybody, and I hope someday my grandchildren grow up to be billionaires. That'd be wonderful, especially for a guy who for 36 years was listed as the poorest man in the United States Congress. But having said that, all kidding aside, everybody has to pay their fair share. I'm not trying to gouge anybody. Everybody has to get in the game. If we put in place a minimum 15% tax on the profits of corporations, the ones that didn't pay any tax, that would raise $250 billion, $240 billion.
I'm not. Listen, folks. I'm not trying to be unfair here. It's hard to dislike that guy, even when I get annoyed with him. Okay, so that is the president trying to sell that bill, and now that's all I've got audio-wise for you, but lots more news to mention. It's time for everything else, rapid-fire style, a whole bunch of headlines, much as I can fit in a few minutes. It's a news dump, folks.
Lethal panther on the prowl, on its prey it jumps. You're bleeding out at the temples on today's news dump.
Oh my God, there's a black panther has attacked your temples. Pete Coe is back. All right, lots to get to. First of all, the Tampa Bay Lightning is a hockey team out of Florida, and they beat the Canadians, the Montreal Canadiens. Yeah, that sucks for them. Sucks for Canada. I would have liked to see Canada win that one. Tampa Bay Lightning, congratulations, back-to-back Stanley Cup champs. Also, speaking of sports, I rarely do sports, but I'm just seeing it tonight, mentioning it. I watched a bit of the England-Denmark game. England won 2-1. Pretty exciting game. And it was in England, so bringing a lot of joy to them. They will go on to play Italy, I think, in the final this Sunday. Care about soccer. Woke up yesterday morning to news that the president of Haiti, Jovenel Moïse, was assassinated at his home. His wife, the first lady, was also hospitalized and now receiving treatment in the States and Florida after being shot at a raid in the middle of the night. The details still developing about that terrible story coming out of Haiti, but that is bad news, it would seem. Also wanted to mention here in the news dump that, speaking of deaths, Robert Downey Sr. died. He was a filmmaker and called a true maverick. Of course, his son is Robert Downey Jr., and he died 85. Robert Downey Sr. died 2 weeks after his 85th birthday. He was a renowned maker of independent counterculture films in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, best known for his 1969's Putney Swoop, a satire of the advertising industry, and a lot more. So a lot of interesting tributes being paid to Robert Downey Sr. yesterday. L.A. County seized illegal pot. It's legal in California, but they got illegal pot valued at a record of $1 billion. Sheriff warned growers for cartels, your days are over. A 10-day operation in California's Antelope Valley. Sheriff's officials said they seized 373,000 marijuana plants, 33,480 pounds of harvested marijuana. The estimated street value is more than $1 billion, making it the biggest haul ever in Los Angeles County, and it means very little, according to me. The storm Elsa is weakened. It's made landfall in Florida. Folks listening down in Florida said it's not too bad. I hope I'm getting that right. But there's been some pretty bad maximum sustained winds, but not a lot of damage, I guess. I hope I'm getting that right. Hopefully it wasn't too bad. Florida, let me know. New York mayoral race is over. Eric Adams will won the Democratic primary. Most likely he will win the election in November. But that's pretty big news out of New York. What do you think about that? I don't know that much about it. I haven't been paying that close attention, but most progressives that I respect are pretty disappointed by it. There are still Americans serving in the military in Iraq, and a Pentagon spokesman confirmed that 2 U.S. military servicemen were injured in a rocket attack on an air base in western Iraq earlier Wednesday. 3 law enforcement officers were shot in Chicago on the heels of a violent holiday weekend. U.S. job openings have rise to a record high. U.S. employers posted a record high number of open jobs for the second straight month as rapidly rebounding economy has created intense demand for workers. Number of available jobs last day of May rose slightly to 9.21 million from 9.19 million in April. And why am I reading all these numbers? You heard the headline. There's a lot of jobs out there. Go get yourself one and use Indeed.com. How about that if you're looking for jobs or qualified candidates? Give them a shout out because they've been a generous sponsor of this here program. All right, that's all I got for you here on today's News Dump. But I do have 2 awesome guests joining me, both I was going to say both for the first time, but Steve Levine has been on once before, but I was really excited to talk with Steve about electric cars and his new media outlet that's going to be covering the electric car industry. That is coming up. But first, I've got ViceNews congressional reporter Cameron Joseph joining me for the first time. Very smart guy. Love talking to him and love reading his reporting to get ready for today's interview. I highly recommend that you follow him and that you read him at Vice News. He's on Twitter at Cam_Joseph. He's a senior political reporter for Vice News, a contributor to the Almanac of American Politics, and just really good stories that we talked about. His story about reporters who are really struggling after the Capitol riot, 6 months later, still struggling. We also talked about how a lot of Republican Senate races are challenged by Trump's election lies and so much more. Very excited to have him on for the first time. Here's Cameron Joseph of Vice News right now. All right, I'm psyched to get Cameron Joseph on the show. I just told you all about him. He's had a really impressive and respectable career covering Congress in Washington, D.C. He's doing great work now at Vice, and I want to talk about that work. Cameron, welcome to the show. Psyched to have you. Really, really admire the work that you do over at Vice News.
Thanks a lot. It means a lot.
Yeah, you've been covering Congress and politics for a while. You've worked in a number of different media outlets. You know, how has it changed? How much has it changed in the 4 years of Trump? I mean, you covered it under Republicans and Democrats, running Congress in the White House. Trump changed a lot in terms of the relationship with media and with reporters. And as you write, the insurrection seemed to have changed a lot. So did the pandemic because of people wearing masks. So what are the major changes that you've experienced, that you've observed in your reporting, your relationship with Congress in general? What's changed since Trump became president?
I mean, I think everyone's a little more hostile towards each other. I think that we see Democrats and Republicans really disliking each other, really distrusting each other rather than just doing it for show. And we see a lot more hostility towards reporters. And we also see reporters just kind of not being willing to put up with the BS anymore. I don't know how much I can and I'm supposed to swear on this show.
You are supposed to swear. I thought we had.
Reporters are sick of the bullshit. I think it really is what it comes down to. And, we saw this developing. I started working in D.C. in 2009. I came here the same week as Obama. And it was fun to try and find a rental at that point because everyone was coming to the inauguration, kind of a mess. But so I've been covering this for a minute. I was here for the GOP takeover and the Tea Party rise in 2010. I was here for the 2012 Obama reelection, the big wins for the GOP in 14, obviously Trump coming around in 16, and then the chaos of the last 4 years. And I think what we've seen, and we started seeing this during the presidential election in 16, and I think it's just come to more and more of a head is, there used to be kind of a very clear both sides are, entitled to their own opinions and people can say whatever they want. And, you can't call a lie, and you have to use these euphemisms in journalism. And I think Trump kind of dropped the veil on a lot of that. And as you started saying the quiet part louder and louder in the GOP, especially, Republicans started leaning more and more into that. And, they're aghast when you ever call them racist, but sometimes some Republicans are racist and they say racist things. And, we've seen this progression that I think bipartisan, nonpartisan reporters who had never joined a political party, who were very cautious about how they wrote about things that they kind of sensed but weren't sure about. Back when Sarah Palin was the leader of the Tea Party movement, are a lot more explicit about this now, and are willing to come out and call things for what they perceive them as. And it becomes a lot easier when you don't see that filter so much on the GOP side. And while we don't see, Republican rank and file lawmakers, the important ones, the ones who are actually leading the party in positions of power, like McConnell and McCarthy, saying things that are racist, we see them condoning and coddling a lot of their members, especially on the House side with McCarthy, who won't punish Marjorie Taylor Greene, won't punish Gosar. And so it's really changed. And I think reporters are finally waking up to this. And frankly, it took me a while in an evolution. I was a pretty green reporter who really still to this day really wants to treat everybody fairly. And I don't think Republicans as writ large are evil. I think there are ones who really care about the country, who are really trying to do right. But the direction of the party as a whole is kind of a scary and dangerous thing that we've seen. And so it's a shift that I feel like more people are willing to call BS on. I went out to talk to a bunch of reporters who are in the Capitol for the insurrection, and really went after, explicitly try to find folks who are really nonpartisan, folks who have good relationships with lawmakers in both parties, who have been there a long time. I talked to 5 reporters. They have a combined about 8 decades experience on the Hill. All of them have been up there for at least a decade. And John Bresnahan, I thought, was the most interesting. He's been up there since 1994, and he's a long time reporter with Politico. He just went and co-founded this new newsletter called Punch Bowl News. That's worth reading. You should check it out. And it's very inside DC, that they have good relationships with McCarthy's office and talk with McConnell's folks and get all these pretty highbrow interviews and kind of play the insider game very well. And Brez was like, look, this changed how I feel about things. He was talking about how he said he never really felt that scared, except for one moment where he thought his exit route had been cut off during the riots when he was out in the protesters. He was he was one of the few folks who were kind of in the hallways watching these protesters / rioters, he was only really scared once, but he said the next day was hard. And he came back and he was talking about how he was so angry. And the thing that had shocked him the most wasn't the riots. It was that a majority of House Republicans had come in after the riots and voted against certifying Biden's election victory in a bunch of states. And so it really, I thought, was telling to me that he'd said that. And he and I were talking about covering these Tea Party protests back in the day. Mm-hmm. And there was a big one on the Hill that he was at where the people were booing John Lewis, and he didn't report it, he didn't hear it, but somebody else said the N-word about John Lewis. And then later in the day, he'd been out in the crowd and he heard someone use the N-word, and he kind of just wrote it off as like, oh, there's one racist idiot in this crowd. This isn't what the thing is about. But he now looking back on it, he thinks he should have covered it as a white rage event. And the Tea Party wasn't exclusively that, but that was a component of what drove the Tea Party, as we saw, as it morphed into Trumpism. And so, it was interesting hindsight from him. Talked to Lisa Desjardins at PBS.
She's awesome. I've known her for a long time. Really, really good reporter. And go ahead. Sorry.
PBS is the most, down the middle, don't offend either party, make sure everybody's watching, really careful, important journalism. And, they really build themselves as that. And she was talking about how she hasn't slept since the riots. And she was one of the few who actually went out into the crowd in the hallways and was trying to interview these folks. And she was saying, she hasn't been that emotionally affected, but just how much the members have been affected. And Republicans and Democrats, this is building. Some Republicans, long before the vaccines rolled out, were refusing to wear masks. They were meeting constituents, flying in on airplanes, and then refusing to wear masks in elevators on the House floor. They wouldn't socially distance. And Democrats were just fed up with it. And this is this building tension, even more so than the Trump years, where they're just like, you don't respect trying to keep us alive. You don't respect trying to keep COVID, at bay within an institution that, frankly, is dominated by a bunch of old folks. It was a really dangerous thing to do, and Democrats were kind of just had it. And then we saw the insurrection, and we saw, in the moment of the insurrection, I talked to Eric Wasson, as a Bloomberg reporter, and he recounted how he's sitting there not too far from Dean Phillips, is a Democrat, pretty moderate Democrat from Minnesota, not a guy who usually gets up and yells at Republicans. He really tries to work across the aisle. And Paul Gosar was up objecting when they got the alerts on their cell phones that something was going wrong and there was a security breach. And he gets up and I can't remember the exact phrasing, but Phillips yells down at Gosar, "This is all your fault."
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is striking moments, right? And so, people who really try and be fair and try and treat things equally and give everybody a shot at, and let people say their beliefs and give them the benefit of the doubt, it's different now, and it's tenser all around. I think it's a very toxic atmosphere, especially on the House side. But it's gotten pretty dark and dreary up there, and a lot of the journalists who lived through this insurrection were there in person and had their life. A lot of them feel like their lives were threatened. Now, are going back into this building, and a fair amount of Republicans are trying to memory hole this and pretend it wasn't as serious as it was, or that, it's being dealt with elsewhere. They don't want to talk about it because they feel like Democrats are using this horrible thing for political reasons, which frankly, some of them are. But it's a toxic environment, and it's a really unpleasant place for people who, some of them have PTSD to go back into day after day.
It's a great piece. Everybody should read it. You interviewed a whole bunch of really good reporters, and it reads it's riveting because they're talking about the day and what they experienced, and then they talk about how, it has affected them afterward. And it looks like that piece specifically of yours is getting a tremendous amount of attention. It's titled So Angry. Reporters who survived the Capitol riot are still struggling. The reporters who survived the insurrection are still covering Congress, but things don't feel normal, as Cameron just talked about. But do you know, I don't even know if this is appropriate to me to ask, but how popular is this piece? And because I'm seeing, yesterday when it posted at ViceNews, I saw so many important, respectable folks sharing this, and I wonder, why it seemed to have struck a nerve. If you have a thought on that, you post great stuff every week, every day almost.
I appreciate that. Yeah, look, journalists, and I am guilty of this myself, we love reading about ourselves, right? We're all narcissists. But this is, and media stories that talk about things that are being underreported in the media, I think do well. So, I don't want to pat myself too much on the back for this piece, because I think there is some of that going on. But at some point, people are still dealing with this, and they're still dealing with the after effects. And so many reporters who, really are dealing with some emotional fallout from this. And I think those who are on the Hill are the ones who went through the most, but a lot of us watched the building we've worked in for, that's been my office for a decade, right? I've worked at 5-6 publications, but every publication I've been at, I've been on the Hill, at least 2-3 days a week on average when I'm not out on the campaign trail covering these same folks. And I have my jacket up, my suit jacket up there, and coffee mugs, and I'm friendly with the guys in the cafeteria, and know if they're, friendly with a couple of the police officers who are stationed where I usually go into the building. And, it feels personal. It's not just that the Capitol was intact. It's that your office building was attacked. And so folks are dealing with this, and, we're kind of all just expected as journalists to push on. And I think that is an important thing. And look, we're not war reporters, right? I don't want to put this up against folks who are embedded in Afghanistan or Iraq, or covering things in Somalia, or, who spent long periods of time covering, the fallout of the Haiti earthquake, or, who are covering things in countries where dictators are imprisoning reporters. This isn't that. But, a lot of these folks have covered issues like that. Bresnahan was a Navy veteran and served in the late 70s, early 80s. And Lisa did go and cover the fallout of the Haiti earthquake. And Ginger Gibson, an NBC News editor who I talked to, who was there that day, she started out her career, she was covering murder scenes and natural disasters. And Eric, had guns pulled on him in Cambodia by the military when he was covering an event where they were kicking folks out of the land they lived in for decades. So, these are all folks who have had other kind of dicey experiences and seen a lot of things that can be kind of traumatic. And the fact that this is sticking with them, I think, is really notable.
Yeah, but I don't even. Yeah, I do, but I don't. That's an important point to make and discern between conflict and war reporting, or reporting from, violent areas or natural disasters. I think that's a fine and important point to make. But this is different. This is different for so many different reasons. But it would be like reporting on your home from your home that a thing happened at your house, in this case, your place of work, as you just so articulately explained. This is where you go to work, and this is where the event happened. So you have to keep going back to that work. And I think if you know a little bit about PTSD, I've interviewed a lot of people about it. I mean, you can understand that that's the thing. One of the healing things is to move away from that place that haunts you, because every time you go back. And so whether it's a school shooting, and even though you weren't shot, or maybe no one was killed, luckily, in that school shooting, you're still traumatized every time you go back to that building. And so I actually don't think it's even that important to make that comparison, because trauma is what it is to different people. People experience it differently. And you do a great job in this piece, with all these really respectable journalists who are vulnerable and honest with you. And I applaud them for talking to you on the record, and I applaud you for writing and covering it. But one more question on this before I try to move on to another piece of yours at Vice News, Cameron, which is everybody that worked on the Capitol. You could be a far right-wing conspiracy theorist, I suppose, racist or something. You could be a hardcore left-wing, whatever. But or you could be not political. Maybe you're just a Capitol police officer, or you work, as you said, the cafeteria or maintenance or something. You don't even pay attention about it. This is just your job. But on that day, a whole bunch of Trump supporters attacked you. You know who they were? You saw them? It's not political. There's no way to spin it. You know who did it. You know why they did it. It's not tough. And yet you now have to deal with every day, whether it's the police officer, the cafeteria person, maintenance person, or the people who are in the know, the representatives, their staffs, and all of you journalists, with people saying that's not what happened. You all saw it happen. You don't have to be political. You don't have to be educated. You know who's there. They're saying it wasn't them. They're saying it was the FBI. You cover a little bit of this in that piece. Talk to me about how people view those who did attack and what the catalyst was, and how a lot of folks and Republicans are just denying it all. Didn't happen. Wasn't them.
Yeah, and I think it's not all Republicans, right? It's a segment of Republicans.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely.
We were talking about the Matt Gaetzes and Paul Gosars and Marjorie Taylor Greens and Andrew Clarks, and there's this contingent of about 25, 30 House Republicans and about maybe 3 or 4 Senate Republicans who are kind of in that vein, who are just crazy, right? And I mean, maybe crazy is a little too far, but either they're crazy or they're crazy like a fox, and they're doing something to memory hole this whole thing. They're denying what happened. They're claiming that either it was Antifa or these were just tourists, or now the latest conspiracy theory that we have coming from Matt Gaetz, that it was FBI informants who were in the crowd and intentionally instigated this to make the right look bad. These are just not true. They're just lies, and they're lies with a political purpose, because they want to make this not about what it was and turn this into an event. And all the folks yelling about, you want to expose the police officer who shot Ashley Babbitt, who was a rioter, who was at the doors of the House gallery, the Speaker's gallery, who was literally within eyesight of lawmakers who they hadn't been able to evacuate yet. And, you talk about whether they went too far in shooting her. There's things to discuss about this. Usually police officers have their names out, but it's turned into this wild conspiracy theory, and she's become this hero in QAnon universe, and then bleeding into the modern Republican Party. Yeah. And it's really, I think, personally frustrating for journalists. And we try, a lot of these folks are myself included, we try and separate our personal emotions from this, right? There's a way we feel about it, but I really try and give people the benefit of the doubt. But when you're lying over and over and over, you're lying. And that doesn't need to be an emotional thing. That's just a statement of fact. And, we see Republicans, Kevin McCarthy, who said that Trump bore some culpability for this, it's paraphrasing, right after the attack. 2 weeks later was down at Mar-a-Lago kissing Trump's boots. And so, he doesn't wear boots. You know what I meant to say there, but we all
saw it happen. Yeah.
Yeah. This is crazy. And Mitch McConnell, really went hard hitting speech right after he voted.
Yeah. I rewatched that. Somebody posted that last night as the 6-month anniversary, which is partially why you're covering it. And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but yeah, he basically, he said, Trump, this was horrible. And Trump bears responsibility for it. Basically, I think. What else did he say? I mean, and
then he went and McConnell, I think, it was a very tough speech. and Trump has been coming after him hard afterwards. And now you see him, for the sake of trying to take back his own power and win Senate control in 22, he sees this as a dangerous issue. And so he's trying to avoid talking about it as much as he can. And he
sank the investigation into it, the commission.
Yeah. Exactly. That Kevin McCarthy had his own committee chair had worked out a compromise to have this be a completely balanced bipartisan effort, and then they still sank it. And so I think that says where they are politically. Even if they're not denying what happened, they don't want to talk about it because it's politically disadvantageous for them.
Although they are apparently, I guess I'm just seeing this news today, that Kevin McCarthy has agreed to send Republicans to the, is it called Select Committee that Nancy Pelosi and Democrats have created. I mean, he doesn't have to, and he could sit there and point at it and say it's political or whatever. But we remember the Democrats that were at all the Benghazi committees and investigations and so on. They were there, I think, for the most part. Some people wanted them to boycott and not be there. But isn't that the news that Kevin McCarthy is, in fact, going to agree to put some Republicans on this committee and allow this investigation, not that he has to say, to go through?
That's what I heard, and I got to admit, I was scrambling to get another story up.
No worries. All right, I just saw that break.
The names of the list, but yeah, he's putting people on who are going to. My guess is he's going to put folks on who are going to toe the party line and make this as much of a partisan endeavor as possible, because if it seems partisan, then half the country isn't going to listen to it. And that was the point of this bipartisan effort that they were trying to do. Right, yeah. It was set the politics aside and really look at what happened. But it's kind of impossible to set the politics aside when it was the president of one party who instigated it, right? And so Republicans just don't want to have a real, fair, balanced thing that looks at this that could make them look bad and could bleed into the swing voters that they're worried about in 22.
I think the best journalists who do what you do, and you're one of these types of people, are those who don't fall for any kind of attack from a politician, Republican or Democrat. They don't. When they try to make it about you, you're like, thank you, I appreciate it. Now to my question. And that's hard to do. I respect you kind of leaving yourself outside the story, your own emotions outside the story. You're accused of being enemy of the people, fake news, and worse. And then you continue on with your question and with your reporting. However, that must have been even more challenging during the pandemic. You wrote about this at ViceNews. I mean, if you're, which you've been doing, for years, running around the Capitol, trying to, get people on the record and answer them questions. I mean, that's part of how I imagine you do your reporting. I'm sure you can call them, and I'm sure you can go in their office, but sometimes they don't take the call. They don't invite you in. You got to go try to get the answer. You got to do the job. But if they're not going to wear a mask and now not going to get vaccinated, that makes your job more challenging. But it also, at a certain point could have put you in personal danger, which then also creates difficulty in your doing your job. Talk to me a little bit about how you dealt with that when it was a mask thing and how you deal with it now when it's a vaccine thing. Because I think I read in your reporting today that a huge amount of Republicans are still not vaccinated. I'm sure you are. I'm sure all reporters or most people probably working that Capitol, I think, have to be, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it's been bizarre. I mean, look, I was very cautious about COVID and I have asthma, which turns out actually isn't that much of a COVID threat. But I basically was not going in, right? The only times I went into the Capitol were to renew my press pass on the annual basis that I had to. So I, was very cautious, and it really made reporting harder, right? Because if someone was trying to avoid me, they could avoid me. And if I was trying to talk to a lawmaker, I couldn't just catch them outside of votes or walking off the Senate floor or outside a committee hearing like I'm used to. And so it really changed how I report. I ended up leaning really hard into looking at what was happening in all these states as they scrambled to try and get a functional voting system in the middle of a pandemic, and all of the opportunity this was giving President Trump and Republicans to attack the system and create conspiracy theories about what Democrats were doing that then they were later going to use to attack the election, which I hate to say I was right about, but it was the biggest story of the year. And so I leaned into that, which didn't require as much in-person coverage. Right. And so try to find workarounds. But I've been back for, I guess, about 6 weeks now. And the first day I went in there was the day they lifted the mask mandate. And it was a pretty strange experience walking in, a little nervous with a mask, and then everyone's maskless. And I just kind of went for it. And after a couple hours, you start feeling normal, Mm-hmm. But it was the day that the Republicans in the Senate, they lifted it. And basically, look, I take a risk when I talk to Ron Johnson because he's not vaccinated. I still talk to Ron Johnson. It's a calculated risk that I take. Usually he doesn't give us more than a few minutes anyways. So, but on the House side, it's different. And, there's been surveys. I forgot who did it, but at least as a couple of weeks ago, more than half of Republicans either haven't gotten the vaccine or refuse to admit that they've gotten the vaccine for political purposes because they think it'll hurt them. And so, and the first day I was up there, the Pelosi was still requiring masks on the House floor because of this. And there was a protest of about 25 Republicans where they went maskless, even though almost all of them haven't been vaccinated and are proudly anti-vax. And they came marching off the floor in a group. And it was, the first time I've seen Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene in person. And they come out laughing. And I think Chip Roy was there, and a bunch of them are marching off the floor. And I'm just backing up, and I'm a big guy. I'm 6'4". And I'm like, try not to knock into anybody as I like shuttle down the hallway because I don't want to be within a few feet of a huge group of them.
Have you stopped to think about, I'm sure you have, how bizarre that must be for you as a reporter? You've been covering these people. I'm sure you have all kinds of personal opinions. I hope you do. I hope you're a human. You seem so painfully objective on this stuff, but you must have personal opinions on people, on politicians, knowing their record, knowing their personality. And you must think, I really don't want to talk to this person. I really don't have to be around this person. But you have to. It's your job. You're a reporter. You have to talk to these people for your story. And you cover Republicans specifically, as a matter of fact, at ViceNews. And now you're looking at them like, I don't want to talk to them because I don't want to die. I don't want to get sick. I don't want to get somebody else sick. What a weird choice to have to make, to have to physically back up so that you don't get sick or get somebody else sick. What a weird...
it's not so. Look, I've been really lucky. Look, the risks I've had to take for this job are lower than the average grocery store employee in America. So I don't want to hype up how brave I am for going to... Well,
reputationally, you can get fucked up pretty bad, though. I mean, yeah, you're not maybe as much personal danger as somebody who works in a in a meat factory. But go ahead. Sorry, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, look, journalists take risks. I have been more risk averse than a lot of journalists. I have colleagues at Vice who have been flying to go cover crazy. I had colleagues who went down to CPAC in Florida this year before vaccines were really getting spread around. And so, it's the level of risk I'm taking is relatively low, and I don't want to overstate the risk that I'm taking.
I know, but my point is not the risk you're taking. My point is that's weird. To have to physically
what's been normal in the last year? This has all been screwed up, right? Like the whole world has been weird. And I think that, the tensions we're seeing in the Capitol played out everywhere over these masks fights about people refusing to wear masks when they go into grocery stores or, and now we're seeing the opposite a little bit on the left where, people will give you a dirty look and cross the street if you're walking maskless after getting vaccinated on in public outside. Yeah. So look, people are not necessarily thinking rationally about this. I think one side is a little more dangerous than the other in terms of spreading a dangerous virus, but people are not necessarily super rational, and there's kind of
what do you think of though? I want to get, if we hopefully have time, you got a few minutes left, because I want to talk about your latest piece about how the big lies affecting Republican Senate races. You get really good reporting on that, specific races, but I just do want to ask one more question just on this, which is I don't know if you've seen this data but just the idea of where people are getting sick and where people are dying, it is correlated really closely to red and blue, not states, districts. States, yes, but also within those states, districts. It's like down to your political beliefs on whether or not you've gotten vaccinated. And we also know that the people who are going to hospitals, are getting very ill and dying, are entirely not vaccinated. So what's the question? Is there an appropriate question to ask a congressman from one of these districts where people are getting sick and dying because they're not getting vaccinated? I mean, it's so crazy how correlated it is to people's politics. And maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe that data is correlated inappropriately somehow. But boy, it doesn't seem to be that way.
No, I mean, that's what we've seen. Look, we've seen some Republicans come out. There's a great video of a bunch of Republican doctors who came out just as the vaccines are becoming available, and they're all lawmakers who are also doctors in past life, and they're all encouraging folks to get the vaccine. And so there's plenty of Republicans who are trying to do good work.
Except for Rand Paul. Where was he? He's a doctor and an anti-vaxxer, I think, right? He got COVID too.
he might be the exception on that list. Okay. But yeah, look, this has become a partisan issue, and it became a partisan issue because President Trump made it a partisan issue and attacked the science that would keep people safe. And he has a huge swath of the country that listens to him. And he got vaccinated, but unlike all of the other former presidents, did not do it on camera. And if he went out and wanted to save his own voters, and frankly, at the most crass, awful political calculation, wouldn't you want your own voters to die? Or if you were going to head into 2024, if you're talking about like another 100,000 people and it's going to be 70% Republican, keep them alive so they can vote for you. I mean, just like own personal terrible calculations, but these are people, and I have a relative who is pretty conservative, and he's got a bit of a needle phobia. I'm not going to say who it is, but he hasn't gotten vaccinated yet. And
is it your Uncle Mike, Cameron?
I don't have any uncles, Mike.
Right.
But yeah, look, it's I'm not going to blow up Mike.
No, he has a needle thing, but he still got it.
It's I want my relatives and friends to be safe, and I have Republican friends who haven't gotten the shot, and so. It's frustrating that it's become so political, and I understand people's hesitation and concerns about this. Sure. But yeah, we're seeing new variants that are more deadly and more contagious, and we're seeing spikes in red states, districts, counties, and we're not yet seeing them in blue states, districts, counties. But that doesn't mean that we won't have a breakthrough vaccine will take us all back down the rabbit hole.
Right.
It's frustrating and concerning, and I think if there was an easy answer for this, someone a lot smarter than me would have come up with it at this point.
Your most recent piece, Vice.com, is Trump's election lies are taking over Republican Senate races. It's been 6 months since the Capitol riot, and GOP candidates are Trumpier than ever before. By Cameron Joseph, who I'm talking to, whose work is great. You should follow him on Twitter, all the notes and links in the show notes. But Cameron, you go through a bunch of specific races here, and what an interesting wager this must be to have to choose as a Republican candidate for Senate, which is a much different way to run a campaign than a increasingly gerrymandered district, and have to answer that question about who won the election. It's nuts that we're there, and so let's cut right to the chase. What's Herschel Walker's answer? He's running in Georgia, apparently. He's got Trump behind him. They're good old friends.
Yeah, Herschel Walker, you may remember, Heisman Award winner at Georgia, and played for Trump's USFL team, was an NFL star, and he became one of Trump's loudest African-American surrogates over the last 5 years, and spoke at the RNC last time. And Trump has been pushing him really hard to run for Senate, and said last week that he thinks he's convinced him, basically. And, he sent out a statement in March that really froze the GOP field, saying, "Run, Herschel, run." And Herschel Walker had a couple of tweets with "Stop the Steal" right after the election, and saying that, suggesting that Georgia had been rigged against Trump, and that there'd been election fraud there. And we see Adam Laxalt in Nevada, I think, is number one with a bullet in terms of this. He was former attorney general, grandson of very, very famous, prestigious political figure in the state, Paul Laxalt, and he basically came out as Trump's campaign co-chairman and just filed all these frivolous lawsuits claiming that there had been tens of thousands of illegal votes cast, claiming that undocumented immigrants had been voting, claiming that a bunch of people who'd left Nevada because of COVID were mailing in ballots, pushed to claim that a woman had went in to vote in person, but her ballot had already been cast by mail, and that was just evidence of fraud, and all these things were tossed out. Like, he wasn't winning these cases. December 31st filed a case after Nevada had already sent its electors in and certified its election, and just a week before the Capitol riots, alleging that a bunch of undocumented immigrants had voted. And he wasn't calling them undocumented, he was calling them illegals. And so this is, he kept pushing this, and now he is the odds-on favorite. He hasn't officially jumped in yet, but is likely to run for Senate in Nevada, and is probably going to clear the field. And Trump world loves him, and Senate Republicans seem pretty supportive of him. And so this is a situation where Nevada is a state that Biden and Clinton barely won, and people forget exactly how swingy it still is. Mm-hmm. And They've had a good Democratic machine there. It's one of the last functional machines, and that, got taken over by Democratic Socialists recently. And so Harry Reid's old machine may not be working so well now. And so this is a race where Republicans are really hopeful that they can win.
There was a time, though, and you covered these races, when Republicans stupidly, ask any Republican strategist or Mitch McConnell, nominated crazy people in states they could have easily won with a more sane candidate, and they then lost that seat. And so a lot of people who remember that are thinking about, well, if Herschel Walker or some conspiracy theorist or overt racist, whatever you want to say, wins a Republican primary, then where are we now with that same analysis? Because the country has shifted remarkably, and you can tell me which way or what. I mean, I guess it's different state by state, but what do you think of that analysis? Of, like, if Republicans nominate someone who's too far gone, too crazy, then a seat that should have been safe could be lost?
Well, I think that's absolutely true. We saw that in 2010. We saw Christine, I'm not a witch, O'Donnell lose a double.
That's the best.
And Harry Reid won re-election because the woman who was running against him,
that's right,
said a bunch of wild things, including asking a bunch of Mexican kids whether they're Asian. And saying,
that must have hurt the most because he was the top ranking Democratic senator. They could have taken that seat, but they elected
the Senate majority leader and stayed in the Senate because of it. So, they blew some races in 2010. And I think that the lesson they learned was we need to do something about this. And they got involved in some primaries. Some of that worked, some of that didn't. The MO that they've taken right now, which I think is interesting and possibly more effective, is the official Senate party stays neutral. So we see, Rick Scott, who's a Florida senator, big Trump supporter, is one of the 8 Republicans who voted against certifying all of Biden's state wins, is now running the NRSC. And he said, we're staying neutral. And they're letting Trump run roughshod because, frankly, Trump versus McConnell fight in the GOP, Trump is going to win almost every time.
I'm sorry. What does it mean to stay neutral? If you're running the organization that helps senators?
They're officially not going to be pushing donors towards a candidate. They're not going to be running ads on their behalf. They're officially at least not sending their best staff out there to help them. And the situation is kind of a interesting one. But what we've seen over the last couple of elections is NRSC stays neutral. The official Republican Party stays neutral. But then Mitch McConnell has the super PAC, the Senate Leadership Fund, that's run by a bunch of his former top staffers, and they'll come in and just nuke the hell out of a Republican they don't like. You saw that happen in Alabama a couple of years ago, where Roy Moore ended up winning the primary. They came in and spent a bunch of money attacking Mo Brooks, who's now the favorite to win another seat in Alabama, and basically knocked him flat in the primary and made it. They thought they would have a chance of getting their guy who was an appointed senator through, and I ended up not working out. But the attacks against Brooks did work, and so they did that in Kansas. They helped push through an electable candidate in Tim Hillskamp against Chris Kobach last election, made sure that didn't become for that. So, it's kind of this wink and nod where the official party doesn't come in, but then you can kind of see where McConnell's coming because you'll see tens of millions of dollars land on some guy.
But that's really interesting. Yeah, God, you know this stuff so well, and you're so great to talk to about it. As the election gets closer, I'm gonna annoy you more. But last question, which is about you write about this. I've never been that familiar, and I never bought any of it. J.D. Vance and the whole hillbilly elegy. I mean, I grew up in a pretty rural part of New York. Like, I always look at these types of guys and I'm like, I don't need to hear their point of view. I live that point. Like, I grew up there. So what is this guy saying? And a lot of people would always take on all that shit and say, yeah, that's his point of view. There's a lot of other points of view. The bottom line is he is a fascinating dude in terms of what choices he has made. He's in the running in Ohio for a senator, and he's been deleting tweets that were critical of Trump, and he's saying all kinds of crazy, and people who tried to take him, give him respect and say, listen, you're a thoughtful guy, you're presenting a point of view, it's fair, and now he seems to have gone down a crazy lane. What is your reporting on him and where he is on the big lie?
It's funny. There's this DC fascination with J.D. Vance. Obviously, he had a bestseller. It was made into a movie that I have not watched. But he is not the leading candidate in that race. And so, J.D. Vance, I think, is more likely to finish 5th than 1st in that primary.
Oh, wow. we don't even need to talk about him.
There's a couple of other very serious candidates.
He's selling his soul for 5th place.
Yeah, and look, Peter Thiel's coming in with a lot of money for him, right? The PayPal founder, Republican gay guy, like has a lot of Silicon Valley is really interested in the libertarian leaning Republicans love him. DC's fascinated. New York's fascinated with him. He's obviously kind of a national weird sort of celebrity. Yeah. But he's not that well known in Ohio. And who is well known in Ohio is former state treasurer Josh Mandel, who has gone the Trumpiest and cannot be out Trumped and is, I made a big point of, I'm the first one to say that the election was stolen from Trump. And when we look back on this is going to be considered, a huge problem. And so, and then he's got, on top of that, we've got, I just blinked on her name and I apologize for this, but the former Jane Timken, the former state party chairwoman who was installed by Trump activists to toss out kind of an anti-Trump cadre of Republicans who'd run the state under John Kasich. And so she's now running and has gotten pretty Trumpy and leaning into that too. And we've got a rich businessman who was funded, was a big donor to Trump in 2016, who's also running. And he's actually maybe the least Trumpy in the race, curiously enough. He's saying how he loves Trump's policies, but not the guy. But it's Gibbons is going to be a force. And so there's a bunch of candidates who are actually polling pretty well, who actually have some natural basis of support. I'm not writing off J.D. Vance. I think there's a chance that he could win this primary. We've got, about a year until we actually see votes cast. Not quite, but, a bunch of months, and it's just starting to form up. But, everyone in D.C. and nationally in these politics shows loves J.D. Vance, and I am trying to take him about as seriously as his polling shows, which is particularly seriously.
Well, no, that's good. That's great. But Ohio's such a weird state, man. And that Sherrod Brown, who's a very progressive guy, is one of the senators, and Rob Portman was the other senator who, I don't know if you want, what words, do words matter anymore? I want to call him a moderate, but I don't even know if that matters. But, yeah. But he's the thing, though, that's just wild about this is every time a lot of Republicans step down, I'm thinking of Boehner, I'm thinking of Paul Ryan, I'm thinking and Eric Cantor got, primaried, but these prominent, well-known Republicans, they leave town because they know they're going to lose their primary to a fucking crazy person. And that seems to be a lot who's fighting for this seat that Rob Portman decided not to run again, right?
Yeah, and I think what we've seen is, the Senate GOP is kind of the last vestige of the old school Republicans, right? That they're more, they're not a ton of real moderates, but there's a lot of establishment leaning, don't like the crazies, country club Republican types who, still want to get some stuff done in D.C. and were aghast at what happened on January 6th. And frankly, some of them are heading for the exits. And I thought it was really interesting to watch the list of folks who did object to the election last time around, because a lot of them, and some of them flipped at the last minute after the riots, to their credit. But it was a bunch of freshmen who'd just been elected. So we're starting to see, what comes in like a tidal wave to shift the House is starting to eat at the Senate. And we're starting to see the Senate Republican conference become Trumpier. And I think that, look, this all of these 1-6, stop the steal claims that some of these candidates are making could really hurt them in some of these swing states. But look, we saw Trump win, and we've seen other Republicans win, like Ron Johnson in 2016, who's, now up for re-election if he runs, and is the most, pro-conspiracy theory Republican in the Senate. And so we're seeing these folks can win, and we see what happens when they win. And so the idea that these guys are definitely going to lose, I think is a dangerous concept if you're a Democrat. And a lot of them could win, and then we could see a Senate Republican majority in 2024 that could actually act on not certifying some state results, especially if this comes down to one state and a couple of thousand votes rather than 6 states and hundreds of thousands of votes. And so, I think there's a danger to democracy here that people like to laugh off the clown until the clown becomes president. I remember the Daily News day he announced Trump, they put on the front cover, a clown runs for president. Like, I was wincing at that because I was like, I think we need to take this kind of
dude, you think that's bad? Not that I had the credibility that you did as the Washington bureau chief of the Daily News, or even that the Daily News did, but I was on CNN. I mean, whoever I am, I was on CNN, and this is like maybe 15, I think, and the anchor is said something about Donald Trump, and I laughed at everybody's face. So I mean, I'm on TV laughing at it. Yeah,
we can't bat 1,000. The thing about us is we all say stupid things a lot. Humans say stupid things a lot, but I'm being recorded.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of things wrong. And I thought Trump was going to lose in the last couple of weeks of the election. But I was one of the few people who thought that he was going to win the primary very early on. And you know, I saw even before that in 2012, I was pretty on to Rick Santorum making a real play for Iowa and being a serious force in the GOP primary. And, you know, I think, look, I you know, maybe don't have like the blue collar credit you, but like I'm from the Midwest. I went to a school that had a fair amount of Republicans and, you know, like Tony, you know, Chicago suburbs. But like I have some awareness that everyone doesn't think and act like the coastal voters. And so it wasn't so surprising to me that there was this energy out there. And I think that, you know, folks from DC and New York can sometimes misread what's happening in Georgia or Arizona or Wisconsin.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And I mean, I think I'm mostly surprised not by the folks who voted, you know, where I grew up in rural areas, but, you know, some of the folks where I live now in the suburbs of New York, or, you know, white educated women or whatever category. We're like, wait, what? Those people you overwhelmingly voted for them? Wow, that I definitely had wrong. So you're absolutely right. I mean, it's more the people that I thought I knew, I think, and that's always been surprising. I'll let you go because you have to go do reporting, but I certainly appreciate you sharing it here with me and my audience. You do great work there, and you've had an awesome career. And sometimes people are great reporters and writers and not as good at communicating in this format. But man, fucking awesome! Love talking to you. Love listening to you and your analysis that you can just grab right onto. Even though
BSing. Thanks.
No, it's really good. Not a lot of people can't do it. Thank you very much for joining me, and I look forward to having you back. Keep up the great work at Vice, man, and awesome work.
Thanks. It was fun.
All right. Going overboard with the ass casing, Pete. Take it down a notch. Jesus. No, I really appreciate when anybody joins me, and I try to let them know as sincerely as I can. Go follow him on right now on Twitter. Let him know that you heard him on the show. It's always super helpful and makes it a lot easier to get folks to come back on and know that the show's got a big audience. It's at Cam_Joseph and at ViceNews. Go read him there. All right. Now joining me to talk about electric cars, a really, really smart, nice guy who I've grown to be a big fan of his work. And he's now doing a new adventure. He's been at Axios. He was at the Medium. He was at Quartz. And now he is working for a new outlet that's just been announced. I want you to go to theinformation.com and subscribe to The Electric, which says that we are at the front end of the epical upheaval in transportation. The wealth to be created by the nascent battery and electric vehicle revolutions over the next 2 decades is estimated at up to $24 trillion. This newsletter is going to be exclusively focused on leading technologies, investors, policymakers, and all things electric cars and batteries and charging stations. And so here we go with Steve Levine of The Electric. Awesome. Great. I got Steve Levine. I really enjoyed our first talk. I've been following you before then, after then. I'm really excited about your new venture, The Electric. Welcome back to Stand Up with Pete Dominick. Thank you for joining me and congratulations.
Thanks, Pete. You really jumped on this. I'm glad we were able to get on so quick.
I jumped on it because I jumped on electric cars. I have a 2011 Chevy Volt. It has 165,000 miles on it. About 30,000 miles ago, the battery died, and so now it just runs on gas with the electric engine, so we could talk about that. But the bottom line is, I'm an early adapter. I jumped on solar panels right away. I'm always rooting for and very excited by and biased on these technologies. So I'm super excited that you're going to be covering this exclusively because you really were covering electric EVs, the chargers, all of them at Medium. And now you're doing it over at The Information. So where do I start? Where did electric cars start? I don't know.
Yeah, well, the first thing I wanted to say that you've given us a measure of the Volt battery. We now know that at least in one case, it goes 130,000 miles.
Yeah, you go on these Volt or any other car. There's, obviously message boards and communities for any kind of unique car, and probably even Toyota Corollas. I don't know. But people talk anecdotally about how their Volt is doing in these, and I'm not sure where I line up.
Oh, I see. So, but it seems to me that's a pretty good record. 130,000 miles. That's nice.
I mean, but it's, it's with a 40-mile battery, and then you have to charge it back up. It's a plug-in hybrid, the Volt, of course. That's been around for a while, but we have taken leaps and bounds since I purchased that car. I'm now ready to buy a new one, and I'm super confused by it, so I'm glad I'm talking to you. Yeah. So I've been telling people, if you want to buy electric, lease something first, because in just like 3 years, a slew of really cool vehicles are going to come onto the market much cheaper than they are today, because battery costs are plunging. And around the mid-decade, so like the 2024 models, 2025 models, there's going to be cost parity between EVs and combustion. How can you be so sure? Because that's the trajectory. That's where they're headed. And the number that we're looking at, just to put a number on it, is $100 per kilowatt hour. So they were, when I started doing batteries, which was 10 years ago, they were $1,200 per kilowatt hour. Now they're around 130 on average, and they're headed, you can see, right? So they've gone down 90%. Let's talk about everything that you're going to be covering at the electric, because, electric vehicles are obviously the primary thing that we're discussing. But for electric vehicles, you need the parts, and you're discussing the future of the parts, specifically, obviously, the battery. Cars themselves, have made leaps and bounds in technology in terms of their own raw materials and so on. But we're talking about the battery, and we're talking about the infrastructure in our country or any others for how to charge that battery up. I mean, 10 years ago, Steve, I interviewed, I forget his name, an Israeli technologist and entrepreneur, Agassi, who had this amazing idea. You pull into the gas station, you drop a battery out, they put a new battery in, and you're gone. I was like, that's it, it's going to work. And that was 10 years ago, and it never took off. So I'm so almost cynical about the batteries and the infrastructure and where we're at. And I know that you know about this as much as anybody in the country. So where are we at? Yeah, well, let me say, so Shai Agassi, he burned through $800 million in like 2 or 3 years. It was incredible. No way. Yeah, he did. And that's why that failed. It was a great idea, but he screwed it up. I mean, how do you do that? I don't know what went wrong with that idea. I mean, that concept in theory seems to make sense. Just swapping batteries. That's how I use my lawnmower. I swap batteries. When one dies, swap it out, charge the other one. No problem. Yeah. And now the Chinese are doing it. The Chinese company, NIO, that's their model right now. So look for, that's the way it's happened with us, right? Is that the U.S. The U.S. launches something or invents something, and then in the electronic space, and then the Asians step in and they end up commercializing it. But what's happened? What you're noticing is that over the last 2 years, and really over the last 10 months, everything has changed for batteries and for EVs. So when you were a very early adopter. So you bought the Volt. You were not a sucker. That was a great car. No, Motor Trend Car of the Year 3 years in a row. I'm joking, but I mean, people call me that. Yeah, but at that time, battery, lithium-ion batteries and EVs were mainly an aspiration. So you had those. You had the Nissan Leaf, and you had Tesla if you had $130,000 to spare. But the cost of these vehicles was so high, way out of this world. And so who you had buying were first movers, dreamers, people who wanted to make a personal statement and so on. Yeah, I think I paid like $42,000 with a $7,000 tax rebate. Yeah. So what's happened is that suddenly these incremental cost improvements accumulated, and basically last year people noticed that, hey, we've got a 90% decrease in battery costs. The
holy grails, which were getting silicon into the anode, getting pure lithium. Pure lithium is the reason that you had fires. The explosions in the batteries. They figured out how to get it into the battery safely, and this has just happened over the last 2 years. That's why suddenly EVs and batteries have changed from an aspiration to reality, and that's why we've got this inflection point coming up where the country, the world, really is going to replace that whole combustion fleet over time with electric cars. And it's big. When we're talking big, it's like one. Let me just finish this one point. I can see you dying to say something, but think it's the number Bloomberg New Energy Finance puts on this. $24 trillion in value will be created over the next 2 decades with electric vehicles.
Are all of the automobile manufacturers making the same bet? Because it would seem that in some of your recent writing, who was it? Toyota? Not so sure that they're going to put it all in. Maybe I'm using the wrong language, but all in. Like, what percentage of automobiles will automobile manufacturers be manufacturing in that time span that will be entirely electric, plug-in hybrid, or still traditional combustion polluters?
Right. So you've got across the spectrum, the ones that are diving in with both feet and body, and that would be like Volkswagen is. GM seems to be, but less aggressive than VW, but still pretty aggressive. Hyundai is, Volvo, and then the ones who are super slow, Ford is a disaster.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
BMW, because
I thought they were I thought they were a lead or something for some reason with some of their, like the pickup, the F-150, and maybe there's a Mustang. I don't know. I have no idea.
No. So they have those two great, really terrific vehicles. Just like you just said, the Mustang is out of this world exciting. Yeah. The F-150 electric is too. And I think they'll sell a lot of those. But what about everything else? What about, the other car companies are saying we're only going to be selling electric by the year 2030 or by the year 2035. We're going to create an EV charging infrastructure. We're going to build, VW is building 6 gigafactories just in Europe.
Those are battery manufacturer plants?
Yeah, right. So Tesla created this name. It's a cool name, Gigafactory, so they're that means they're all in. That means we're betting the company on this change. I really think that that Ford and Toyota, they're super slow. What you're seeing is that some of them are suddenly slowly realizing, and Ford is slowly realizing we're making a big mistake. You're seeing Ford like twice a month comes up with a new announcement. Did we say that we were investing $20 billion? We meant $22 billion. Did we say $22 billion?
Mess.
We meant $25 billion.
Wow, that's
now it's up to $30 billion. Yeah. And so they realize they're all facing a Kodak moment. Kodak suddenly realizes film is out, but it was too late.
A blockbuster video moment, maybe. A million questions. I'm so fascinated and interested and hopeful about this. And so what it sounds like is that automobile manufacturers are also going to be the battery manufacturer as opposed to independent battery manufacturers selling it like any other part to an automobile manufacturer. It's like McDonald's owning their own real estate. Is that the deal? Are they all going to be manufacturing their own batteries? And the other question I have, I might as well just throw it in there, is how many different kinds of batteries are there? Because when I was growing up, I wonder what people think. I wonder if there's any data. What's better, Energizer or Duracell. It's like Coke and Pepsi. It's like, who gives a shit? They're both the same. Aren't they the same battery? They're different ad campaigns, but they're the same chemicals. And by the way, what about all the cheaper little batteries that are sold in stores? So are car manufacturers making their own batteries? And are there a whole bunch of different type of batteries?
Yeah. So the first thing is car manufacturers. Some of them are, and there are big battery companies specialized in this. They are mainly in South Korea and China. Panasonic from Japan supplies Tesla, but there are. Remember, all of these batteries were invented in the United States. Like and then they went abroad for the money to be earned from that. So yes, there are competing battery formulations. This is a geopolitical issue. So there's a competition between the metals that go into the batteries, whether it's mainly manganese, mainly nickel, mainly iron. Do you get silicon into the electrode? Do you get lithium metal into the electrode? And the places that are competing. If, for example, if cobalt and nickel win, then China wins. If iron and phosphate and manganese win, Europe and the United States win. So there's a competition going on, and it's totally unappreciated. I'm going to write about this.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. That sounds like a really fascinating thing to cover alone. Those different chemicals and what and who has them and who has access to them and who wins. Because this isn't a matter necessarily of those raw materials being within the Rocky Mountains or in a Chinese province. It's about who has the rights to where they are. I mean, I feel like I've read about Afghanistan had a lot of minerals, and China and the U.S. were fighting about those rights. And Africa has a lot of different sources for minerals, and who has the rights to those. So that'll be a really interesting thing alone to learn about. Who's winning now?
Yeah. Well, so it looked like China had this all sewn up. So it has spent the last 10 years locking up the supplies of cobalt and nickel and
all over the world,
lithium too, and had most of it and the refining capacity. What you've seen over the last few months is very interesting. The car companies, Volkswagen, Ford, and Tesla, all announcing, actually, we think we're going to use an iron phosphate battery, and VW says we're going to use iron phosphate and manganese, and China going, what? What? And so China thought they had everything locked up, but they don't. And so what it does, it recreates a level playing field. It's an opening for Europe and the United States to get in, but we have to recognize the United States and go run through this opening. And this is why, because GM and Ford, our champions, are moving so slowly that you wonder, are they going to capitalize on this opening?
Where does politics come into play? What is government's role in securing the rights to these minerals, investing and incentivizing into research, or even into companies that are doing this type of work? Because I always look at China and think, well, they have this command economy. I say this, I use this as an analogy where they just beat a drum and everybody goes to work and creates the next best thing as quickly as possible, and they own the future as a result. Meanwhile, we're over here arguing about checkers and ridiculous old technologies, even like coal and so on, because we have more democracy, though it be waning. So what role does the U.S. government have? What role does politics and special interests play?
Yeah, so this is such a great question. So we by the way, we have a history. U.S. has a history of getting behind and incentivizing industries, especially technologies. And this goes back, the whole of the last of the 20th century was that. But the politics.
Are you saying government has picked winners in the United States in the past?
Yes. Yeah. industrial winners, right?
Yeah, of course. Yes.
And remember, we used to have a big thriving middle class, large middle class, we used to be a much bigger winner internationally in economically, and so look at what China and Europe are doing, getting behind their battery and EV industries. They're not picking specific companies usually, although sometimes they are. The main thing is making sowing the playing field to favor their own industries and companies. And this is what the United States needs to do. So yes, the federal government should subsidize EVs, a charging infrastructure, the creation of battery plants, the creation incentivizing the creation of the whole supply chain. And our politics, we're losers, right? Our politics makes us losers because we're not getting behind this industry that is it's a huge wealth creator, and it's a huge geopolitical power creator.
How much of that is, I mean, we could get into it. I'm sure you have thoughts and opinions and insights on it. And how much of that has to do with the old fuel sources and lobbying? So oil and gas, it still donates, a tremendous amount in campaign donations and lobbyist access to politicians and policymakers. And therefore, they still get subsidized. Their industry gets subsidized, which is different than Europe. I think we might have talked about this in the past. Certainly, I've read about it, where it's a lot more money for a gallon of gas, so they drive smaller cars. It controls the market, just as here we subsidize gas. It's cheaper at the pump. We drive further. We have huge cars. No concerns about it. So oil and gas still seems to have a huge say in those incentives and those choices. And that is happening right now, if you like watching the sausage be made like I do, in terms of this infrastructure investment.
Yeah. It's true that the creation of the automobile economy and the fossil fuel economy underlies much of the wealth we created over the last century. It goes all the way back to the 1920s. This what we're talking about. But I don't think that we need to stop. We don't need to stop our support, the existing support for oil and for gas. Like, those are going to transition out over many decades. They're not going away right away. This is foolish. Where some people think, suddenly, combustion cars are going to be gone. No, it'll take. There are 250 million of those vehicles on our roads, and so, I mean,
in America alone.
Yeah, in America, I don't want to spend too much time on that, but just to say that getting behind this new industry doesn't mean you're abandoning the old one. It's just being smart about the technologies of the future. And I'm deadly serious here. This is not a joke. Getting behind, understanding that batteries and EVs are job creating, wealth creating industries of the future that are happening, and we need to be part of that. Like that's an article of faith. That is true, and so let's just do that. And not let, we politicize everything. Like, let's not politicize this. Let's just do the right thing.
No, we will. We'll politicize it because that's how things work, unfortunately. But I agree with you. Everything is political now. What about charging infrastructure? What does it look like now? It's so weird. I got so frustrated a few years ago when I watched this electric, what do they call it, charging station. It had 6 plugs on it. Be built. I watched it be built, and it was being built right near my daughter's dance studio, where I would go several times a week. I was like, perfect. It's perfect. I can charge my Volt while the girls are in dance. They finally finish it. I arrive. I'm so excited. Plug doesn't fit the Volt. None of them. I was like, what are we doing? There's not a universal plug. And so it got me concerned right away that I have a car. I'm ready to rock. You're building the station for me, and it doesn't even work. How much competition will there be? Will they be all the same in terms of fit to different kinds of cars? Right now, this is being debated in Congress, the funding, the infrastructure. But it seems to me like it should be a government project. I mean, I don't care. Whatever works, privatize the hell out of it. But I would think it has to be at least a government investment. Where are we on these plug-in stations? And a lot of people are still worried about, what's it called, range anxiety. And what does it look like in the near future, these things being manufactured, built, and supported by government?
Yeah. So I think this is actually going to happen. The creation of the charging network. But this is the range anxiety, that's already almost a non-issue because the cars are going, the standard is becoming 300 miles on a charge. That's a lot, and if you want to pay more, then you can get a 400 mile, a 450 mile battery. But people, even if the cars will go that far, ordinary people, not first movers like you, are not going to even consider walking into a showroom to look at an electric unless they have noticed around them just routinely that there are charging stations.
Right. Yeah.
And not just charging stations, but fast charging stations.
Yeah.
So people need to have in their minds, okay, I can charge up when I want, and I can charge up 150 miles or 200 miles of charge in, say, 15 minutes. If I can do that, okay, I'm gonna go look. So this is absolutely has to happen, and it has to happen by the middle of the decade. It has to coincide with that inflection point.
Where are we on that? What does the future look like with how fast a thing will be charged? I think most people are familiar with how quickly their mobile phone charges to some extent, maybe their watch or any other battery powered thing. And those of us who have cars know how fast they can charge, and the fact that there's different types of plugs with different types of energy. And what is the range like? Will it be 15 minutes and whatever you just said, 200 miles? And what do those variables look like? And how fast are they changing?
Yeah. So Teslas have this. So, but Teslas don't have a universal plug. No other car makers can use their station.
That's terrible, right?
Well, not if you're Tesla. It's not, but if you're anyone else, yes. And Tesla has the most the most ubiquitous
charging stations,
EV charging network, and so you are going to have. But what has to happen is that the battery, when you fast charge, that damages the interior of the battery because you're forcing electrons into the battery at a very high speed, and that stresses the material. So the thing that has to so what you can do is you can fast charge like 1 out of 4 times, 1 out of 5 times, but that's not what people want. People want to fast charge every single time, and so the batteries need to get better, and that's one of the things you do here when you're talking to researchers. They are making them better, and you are having a competition among GM and Volkswagen and some private folks to build out a network. And so this will happen. But the technology has to catch up, and they also need to do what you said. There needs to be a universal plug that'll work on anyone's vehicle.
Yeah. That pissed me off so much. I was like, I was the early adapter, and I watched it be built, and then I was like, I spent like 5 minutes just trying to. There's got to be a problem there. How does this not go into my car? I couldn't believe it.
I'm pissed off listening to you. But
or don't they sell like a thing? Like when you go to Europe, there's a different plug. Like, can't I just put something on the end of it to make it like? Shouldn't we all be winning here? Anybody who has an electric car, shouldn't all the plugs fit all the cars? You don't.
Okay, but remember, it took a while to get light bulbs right after Edison invented the light bulb. They weren't all the same size. And the plugs, the sockets, it took a while to get those right? The socket was invented in like 1903, and it took a while, right, to get that standardized. So we'll get there.
We gotta get there fast. I feel like we gotta be faster. I mean, I think about the climate crisis. I feel like and that's always been the motivation for me to try to do it, but it just doesn't seem. I'm so excited about it. I'm so excited about you writing about it, but it still feels like it's got to happen faster. It's got to be more affordable, or else we're remain in trouble, which we're going to be anyway.
Yeah, and people need to. So you're worried about that, and I'm worried about that. But most people, when people are thinking about vehicles, they're not thinking about that.
Of course not.
They want a cool car. I think like what the understated thing is will the car makers make desirable vehicles? So yes, they're electric, but do I actually want it?
It's a great point. I always tell people, I know that your individual choices don't make a difference. I do feel, I want to believe that mine made a bit of a difference because I'm a public person and trying to, the first house on the street with solar panels, the first, guy talking about it with the electric car matter. But to me, I always said to listeners and to friends, like, my daughters see me plug in the car. They're going to know I tried. I know it doesn't make that much of a difference. I still eat meat, blah, blah, blah. But, hey, my daughter saw me plug in my car. And when they get older, they're like, my dad had one of those in 2011, dude.
Yeah.
I do it for them. That's
my dad pioneered this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know if they'll ever use the word pioneer in reference to me, but I'll take it. Steve, I am so excited to talk to you. I'm really excited about the electric. People should go subscribe. It's in the show notes, the link to it. Go to theinformation.com. Look for the electric. Follow Steve on Twitter. It's all in the show notes. I want to, I'll be following every article and hope to talk to you whenever you want, because it's so important. Thank you so much. I'm very excited.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Pete.
Stand up. All right, there you go. Steve Levine, The Electric. Definitely check that out and follow Steve on Twitter. Let him know that you heard him on Stand Up. That's always awesome. And thank you also to Cameron Joseph of ViceNews earlier. Thank you to you for listening and for telling your friends and for subscribing with a paid subscription. Go to patreon.com/PeteDominic right now, or go to the paid subscription link in the show notes. I forgot to say earlier and remind you, it is Thursday night. We hang out tonight. If you're a subscriber, I hope to see you tonight at 8 Eastern. And you'll get the link to meet if you are a subscriber for as little as $5. To do that now. Also, now it's time to listen to singer and songwriter, Grammy Award winner, founding member of Starland Vocal Band. Ladies and gentlemen, it's John Carroll singing us out with You Gotta Stand Up. Hit it, John.
They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of a stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up. We got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up. You got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well, and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up, stand